Losing them was your advantage. Not because losing people doesn't hurt. Not because what happened was okay. Not because betrayal feels good. Not because abandonment doesn't leave scars. But because they really believed that losing them was going to be your loss. That's what they believed. They believed that they were the prize. They believed that they were the source of your happiness. They believed that they were the reason you were able to function. They believed that they were the reason you had value. They believed that when they left, when they walked away, when they betrayed you, when they rejected you, when they stopped choosing you, that somehow your life was supposed to fall apart. They thought losing them was your punishment. They thought losing them was your consequence. They thought losing them was the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And maybe for a while you believed it too. Maybe for a while you cried over them. Maybe for a while you missed them. Maybe for a while you questioned yourself. Maybe for a while you wondered if you had lost the best thing that had ever happened to you. Looking back now, you realize something. They were never the prize. And that's a hard realization. Because when you're in the middle of loving someone, choosing someone, believing in someone, sacrificing for someone, it is very easy to convince yourself that losing them means losing everything. But sometimes losing people doesn't reveal your lack. Sometimes losing people reveals your value. Think about that. Because what happened after they left? You survived. Not immediately. Maybe not even perfectly. Maybe not without pain. But you survived. And not only did you survive, eventually you started seeing things differently. You started realizing how much of yourself you had given away. You started realizing how much you tolerated. You started realizing how much of your life revolved around making somebody else comfortable. You started realizing how much of your worth depended on someone else's opinions of you. And that's the part they never expected. They never expected that their absence would give you clarity. They never expected that losing them would force you to find yourself. They never expected that their rejection would become the very thing that introduced you to your own value. Because if we're being honest, some of us didn't know our value until somebody treated us like we didn't have any. Some of us didn't learn boundaries until somebody crossed every single one of them. Some of us didn't learn self-respect until somebody disrespected us. Some of us didn't learn self-trust until somebody betrayed us. Not because those things were good, but because those experiences forced us to ask questions we had never asked before. Why was I so afraid to lose someone who was comfortable losing me? Why did I keep trying to prove my worth? Why did I think I ever had to earn love? Why did I abandon myself to keep somebody else? Those questions change people. Those questions create a different kind of human being. And maybe that's why some people get so confused when they see you now. Because they remember the version of you that needed them. They remember the version of you that tolerated everything. They remember the version of you that kept coming back. They remember the version of you that didn't know their own value. But that's not who you are anymore. Because losing them forced you to become somebody they never expected. Somebody who trusts themselves. Somebody who chooses themselves. Somebody who protects their peace. Somebody who understands their worth. And honestly, maybe that's why your growth bothers some people. Because your growth destroys the role they assign to you. The role of the person who always forgives. The role of the person who always sacrifices themselves. The role of the person who always stays. That person had to die. Not because they were weak, but because they didn't know any better. And maybe that's one of the hardest truths to accept. Sometimes we grieve people who were never actually good for us. Sometimes we grieve versions of ourselves that were destroying us. Sometimes we grieve the fantasy more than the reality. Because if we're honest, some of us weren't grieving who they were. We were grieving who we hoped they would become. And that's a completely different type of pain. There's a verse in Genesis that says, "What you intended for evil against me, God intended for good." And whether you understand that spiritually, psychologically, philosophically, or simply through your own life experiences, the principle remains the same. Human beings have an extraordinary ability to transform suffering into wisdom. Not because suffering is good, but because meaning changes everything. And honestly, this became one of the reasons I wrote Phoenix, From Stability to Power. Because eventually surviving isn't enough. Eventually, you want to understand what happened. Eventually, you want to know why you stayed, why you tolerated, why you doubted yourself, why you abandoned yourself, why you allowed yourself to be disrespected, and most importantly, who you became because of it. Because eventually something shifts. Eventually you stop asking, why did they leave me? And you start asking, what did losing them teach me about myself? That's when everything changes. Because when you realize losing them wasn't your disadvantage, losing them wasn't your punishment, losing them wasn't your failure, losing them was your advantage, because they lost access to someone who loved deeply, someone who cared deeply, someone who sacrificed deeply, someone who would have moved mountains for the people that they loved. You gained yourself. And once you gain yourself, everything changes. You see, they expected you to stay broken. They expected you to stay angry. They expected you to stay dependent. They expected you to stay the same. They never expected you to heal. They never expected you to grow. They never expected you to discover your own strength. They never expected you to realize your own worth and value. And honestly, maybe there was a time when you didn't expect that either. But look at you now. Still standing, still learning, still growing, still becoming. So maybe losing them wasn't the tragedy you thought it was. Maybe losing them was the moment you finally stopped losing yourself. And that's why losing them was your advantage. Peace, blessings, love, and power.